This is tape number ET37 from the library of the Howard Thurman Educational Trust. Two meditations by Howard Thurman. This is side one, entitled The Meaning of Love.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. May I remind you that if you are interested in receiving transcriptions of my talks, you may get them by addressing me either here at Channel 5 or at Marsh Chapel, Boston University. I'm continuing our thinking together about the meaning of love, and today I want to read a few verses from Moffat's translation of the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Love is very patient, very kind. Love knows no jealousy. Love makes no parade, gives itself no airs, is never rude, never selfish, never irritated, never resentful. Love is never glad when others go wrong. Love is gladdened by goodness, always slow to expose, always eager to believe the best, always hopeful, always patient. The working definition that we are using is this, that love is the experience of being dealt with at a point in oneself that is beyond all the good and beyond all the evil. To love is to deal with another person at a point in him that is beyond all the good and beyond all the evil. There is something in the experience which has with it always a note of security, of emotional security. And security in its simplest terms means the experience of having one's needs satisfied. And whoever is able to satisfy one's needs, simple needs or complex needs, the response because of this sense of satisfaction is in terms of not only dependence, but in terms of trust, in terms of confidence, in terms of affection, in terms of love. It is for this reason that religion insists that God loves man, and that it is man's experience of the love of God which in the first instance enables him to be able to love anyone. I wonder if you take for granted the fact that so many of your own basic needs are satisfied by life. And if you take this for granted, then your attitude towards life may not be one of responsibility, responsiveness, of reverence, of gratitude. It may be an attitude that is simply callous. You may decide, for instance, that you rate the fresh air that you breathe and the cool water that you drink and all of the other simple creature ways by which your needs are satisfied. But if you reflect upon your total experience of life in this regard, then your attitude towards life will be one of reverence, and towards the creator of life, one of trust and and confidence. Now, with this background, let us deal more specifically with the question before us. Love means, in simple experiential terms, the ability to let one's life be filled with many simple deeds of gratuitous extras, gratuitous kindnesses as manifested towards people by whom you're surrounded. When I was a boy, I could hardly wait for Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving meant that Christmas was in the offing. And from Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve midnight, I was a mortal boy. I would respond almost instinctively to my mother's needs. During that whole period, for instance, she did not ever see the bottom of the wood box because I kept it full of wood all the time. I had a sense of what was vital for her. I could anticipate her needs. All of this because I knew that Thanksgiving meant that Christmas was around the corner, and when Christmas came, then I would be rewarded for all of these simple, gratuitous extras by which I had filled my relationship with my mother. Now, this mood that I manifested during that time is an indication, it's a sampling of what happens all the time in your relationships with people for whom you have this kind of love and affection. You can sense their needs. You can anticipate their needs. And at the heart of this anticipation, at the heart of this awareness, there is a kind of clear-cut and definitive understanding, so that your response to the need is an intelligent response, as contrasted merely with the sentimental or emotional response. At the center of the dynamics of the feeling, there must be an understanding mind. If I were to put it in a rather caustic phrase, it would be something like this, that in love, the mind must be as hard as ice, the heart as warm as a kitchen stove. This is what I mean. Now, there's a second dimension here. There is the tendency to feel ownership towards the person that you love, and to demand that you will be loved in kind and in quality as the proof that your love has been received. We want to be loved back. Now, this is perfectly normal, very natural. But it is my thought that the necessity to be loved back in exchange for or in return for loving is an extraneous and irrelevant necessity, if I may put it that way. Love does not, at its best, love does not demand that love be given back to one in return. This is illustrated in a rather melodramatic story written many years ago by Olive Schreiner. She calls it the story of Towser. Towser was a little dog. He sat with his tail in a puddle of mud. It wasn't raining except out of his eyes, for he was very sad. Presently, a fine-looking aristocratic mastiff who lived next door came out of his yard and passed Towser's house, and he saw Towser weeping, and he stopped. Towser was a little terrier. He said to Towser, "What's the trouble with you, little fellow? Do other dogs bite you?" "No, I manage to take care of myself pretty well." "Do you get enough to eat?" "Yes, I have bones, and occasionally there's meat on them." "Do you have a place to sleep?" "Yes, I have a box with some rags in it." "Well, what's the trouble with you?" And Towser said, I want to love people. and I want to feel that people love me. And the master said, love? What is that? Have you ever seen it? No, said Towser. Have you ever smelled it? No, said Towser. Have you ever tasted it? No, I haven't ever tasted it. Well, what good is it anyway? And thus applying the pragmatic test to that kind of reality, the mastiff went on down the street. Towser got up, shook the water off his tail and the water out of his eyes, and went in the opposite direction. Presently, he saw a ragged newsboy coming, a newsboy who had a very sad face. And he went running up to the newsboy, literally in a ball of excitement. He didn't know whether to lick the boy's hands first or his feet. He just wanted him so. And the boy called him, Doggy, Doggy. And when Towser came very close to him, he kicked him in the nose. But the lonely boy laughed. There was a singing in Towser's ear now as he went down the other side of the street. He wasn't so sure about how he felt. He came to the outskirts of the village, and there he saw a cottage. The gate was open. He went through the gate, up the steps. At the door, he looked in. He saw an invalid stretched out on a bed. He made a noise at the door, which being interpreted was, if you ask me, I'll come in. So the invalid asked him in. And Towser found that she was a very lonely person. She had had a dog once upon a time, but he'd gone away somewhere. Towser tried to amuse her during the daytime by catching his tail with his teeth so as to take her mind off her suffering. And then in the nighttime, when he would hear her cough, he would get up from his pad and walk over by her bed and rub his head against her hands and lick her fingers to let her know that even though it were nighttime, he knew that she was suffering and he cared. And then one day, the dog that belonged home came back. And Towser heard the invalid say, I don't want to give Towser away, but what shall I do with him? Well, Towser didn't want to be given away, so he went out of the backyard and disappeared. But as he went along, he had the feeling that the invalid, for the first time in her life, had had an experience with someone to whom her invalidism was not a burden. And Towser saw a boy just ahead of him, a boy with a large piece of meat under his arm. And a man jumped from behind a tree, accosted the boy, threw him to the ground, and was trying to take the meat from the boy, and Towser barked at him furiously, and presently the man got up and ran away because he thought somebody was coming. The boy looked at Towser, his face purple with rage, and he said, do you try to do that to me after all that your master has done to me? So he attacked Towser. Well, Towser was thrown into the bushes. The last time I saw him, says the story, he was stretched out in the road. Now, what does this mean? That love at its best does not demand requitement. It gives, and in its giving, it finds its strength and its security and its ability to give more and more and more. This is our privilege, and this is our opportunity. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer.
This is tape number ET37 from the library of the Howard Thurman Educational Trust. This is Side 2, entitled A sense of what is vital.
Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. It is a pleasure to announce to you that beginning next Friday and for the 2 succeeding Fridays, our guest on this program will be Dr. Edwin P. Booth of the Graduate School of Theology of Boston University. Today, I am thinking with you about a phrase taken from the letters of the Apostle Paul. The phrase is this: a sense of what is vital. It suggests the necessity which we all feel for the honoring of overtones of meaning and understanding and wisdom which may not be a part of the ordinary garden variety insight. We note this particularly on the personal level. For instance, when you consider the difference between a kind act and merely an act of graciousness, there is an element that is unmeditated, an element that is unreflective, and an element that is spontaneous and creative about kindness. It is for this reason that men do not ever quite manage to deserve the kind act. It is true that there are many men who deserve honor because of the nature of the contribution which they have made to their generation or to other generations. All men, according to the most creative kind of ethic, deserve respect as human beings, or in the language of religion, as children of God. There are men who deserve varying degrees of recognition because of the way by which they have identified themselves with a particular movement in time and space or in human history. But no one ever quite deserves the kind act. There is an element of gratuity, of something extra in the kind act. Have you been on the receiving end of a kind act, and because of this kind act you have tried to repay the person for the kind act, only to discover that it cannot quite be done. You can't quite balance it out, because what the kind act did for you was something so intimate and so searching and so utterly without merit that it isn't possible for you to measure it in kind. This is why the kind act seems somehow always to be identified with what religion recognizes as the grace of God, the manifestation of a dimension of life which is our experience, even though we do not quite merit it. the psalmist says, he has not dealt with us after our sins, nor rewarded us according to our iniquities. Wherever there is the element of something extra, something that goes beyond the balance, something that spills over, that has no necessity inherent in its operation except the outgoing, flowing quality of the deed itself. This is the kind act, and this is to have a sense for what is vital. Very often this sense for what is vital is manifested in various kinds of human relations. I have a friend in San Francisco, for instance, who works at a mortuary. He is a sculptor. His professional job is to sculpt the faces of the corpses so that they may be lifelike and be characteristic of the person when the person was alive. Whenever he comes home from his day's work, and when his wife greets him and his handkerchief is hanging way out of his pocket, she knows that this is not his good day. And whatever she has in mind to discuss that requires some measure of emotional tension or something else, she knows that this is not the time to talk about it. They agreed on a simple symbol like this, so that the symbol will communicate to the other person what is vital and what is not vital for that particular time. Whenever he greets her and she has on a beautiful handmade embroidered apron which he brought to her from Czechoslovakia many years ago, he knows that this is not her day. And whatever he has on his mind, that the discussion of which may involve a certain amount of emotional tension, he knows that this is not the evening to talk about it. This symbol suggests to each that whatever is vital in terms of the need of the other person, this is the time to honor it. Now, there's a third aspect here. We are all concerned, finally, about having experiences in which we ourselves have a sense of being understood. So much of that which upsets the emotion, so much of that which depresses and casts down in human experience has to do with a private feeling of not being understood. Haven't you said it to yourself many times? In this deed, I'm not understood. One of the most dramatic illustrations of it that comes to my mind is something that I read many years ago, written by a national news reporter who had attended the burial services of Dillinger, the famous or infamous gangster, as the case may be. He said that the only person present at the funeral, the burial moment, other than a minister, was the mother of Dillinger and this particular newspaper reporter. As the mother turned away from the grave of her son, she said to herself over and over in the presence of the newscaster, they didn't understand my boy. They didn't understand my boy. If they had understood him, he would not be where he is today. This is a rather extreme expression of the thing that's on my mind. There is deep within all of us a great need for understanding, a need for feeling that with reference to our lives, with reference to the things that we do which to us are important, we are not required to be on the defensive, to experience the integrity of the act without being under the necessity for being apologetic for the act. To feel that not only are my acts interpreted and somehow understood, but more importantly, that I am understood. I remember talking with a little child once who always insisted on getting headaches or footaches or backaches, and I remarked to her, I'm sure you're doing this because you think that your mother and your father do not love you, do not understand you, so you're trying to attract attention to yourself by getting a headache or getting a backache or getting a toeache. But why don't you be smart, I said. You should know now that when you use this device in order to be sure that you are being cared for, that the thing that gets the attention is the headache or the backache or the toeache. And after all, you do not get the attention. And if you are trying to have a sense of being understood and being cared for, this is not the way to go at it. If I knew you and you knew me, and each of us could clearly see by the inner light divine the meaning of your heart and mine, I'm sure that we would differ less and clasp our hands in friendliness if I knew you and you knew me. This need for understanding is so important in human life that it is the insistence of religion that in the supreme act of worship in the human spirit, when the human spirit is before its God, when it is laid bare before God, that it has a sense of being totally dealt with and being completely understood, so that there is a moment when I can act with utter freedom and with utter enthusiasm and with utter involvement, because I know that not only my deed, but that which is deepest in me, my intent, my purpose, the creative movement of my desiring, all of this is gathered up in the understanding of the individual. A sense of what is vital. This is one of the great necessities of our spirits. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer.